Hey groupers, Pastor Marshall and Psalm 38, the wonderful subject of guilt. Well, I started my message by talking about mommy guilt. So first of all, let's just establish that we're not going to have a mom-dad bashing party. Now, I shared with you when I was growing up that I felt like if I left the house without a belt, I was naked. Well, what about you? What was something in your childhood that produced false guilt? Meaning that you were not breaking a God-given rule or guideline. You might have thought that it was or been told that it was, but now you know that wasn't real guilt. And then, after everyone shared a little bit about that, let's talk about something else before we dig into the text. Does your natural disposition lend itself more towards guilt, or are you more thick-skinned? Are you more sensitive to guilt, or are you more thick-skinned? Well, in the first 8 verses of this psalm, David mentions some physical side effects from his guilt. He says he had no health, his bones hurt, his wounds festered, his head was hanging down, he had back pain, heart groans. Well, what about you? What physical manifestations have you had because of guilt in your life? And then next, in the next 6 verses, David talks about relational fallout as a result of his guilt. What relationships in your life have been negatively impacted or even destroyed because of your sin? And then think about this. Which relationship, when we sin, which relationship is affected first when we sin? And then which relationship are we the most unaware of being affected when we sin? And then finally, which relationship in our life is the most important to reconcile, to restore when we sin? Well, Satan loves to lie and deceive us when it comes to our relationship with God. Satan wants to cast God as being cruel, more harsh, just an evil taskmaster. If he can make God look like a bad guy in our eyes, an enemy, then he has won. And so Satan uses false guilt. So my question along these lines are this. If you're a person that's more sensitive to guilt, what attacks would Satan use in your life? How would he use false guilt in your life? If you are a person that is more prone to thick-skinned, what strategy would Satan use to try to attack you if you're really good at rationalizing away your mistakes? Well, some people see sin as breaking a rule. Other people see sin as a slap in God's face. These two different perspectives. Think about these two different perspectives and how could these different perspectives influence the way that we respond to guilt, godly guilt. In the last section, and this is verses 15 through 22, how does David's tone and his perspective change? And what causes David's tone and perspective to change? And then finally, what is the solution to godly guilt? Is there only one solution to godly guilt? And when we have godly guilt, but we're not ready to try the solution, what are other things that human beings try to satisfy, pacify godly guilt? Well, every week I remind you of the application that we made in my message. And so this last weekend, we talked about real guilt, godly guilt in our life, what real guilt, godly guilt is in our life that we really need to deal with. And then we also talked about, is there any false guilt in our life that we are trying to deal with, but maybe we shouldn't? So I'm just challenging you to spend a little time doing some inventory. Is there anything in my life that is godly guilt? And then what in my life is false guilt that I can just move off the page? Well, I hope that you have a good group, and I look forward to studying with you again next week. God bless.